little sweet tooth. I put syrup on them. This morning, I just had them with some butter, fake butter even. Didn't matter. I ate them like toast.
I drowned them in butter for lunch.
Yeah.
And I almost never have waffles, but last week I had waffles. I had waffles again this week. And then I thought, why don't I have waffles more often?
Waffles
get a bad rap, like, oh, what's the big deal about waffles? No, there is a big deal about waffles. It's very good. It has to be noted.
This is exactly what old school is. It's not like old school. This is exactly what it is.
Okay, now we can move on.
Except that waffle conversation would last 13 more minutes.
That's right. That's exactly right. All right, now let's get on with the serious news. I believe the Kochs are up to no good again.
$889 million. That's what the Kochs and their donors pledged to spend on the 2016 election cycle. Let's read you the first paragraph from this Politico story. It reads like this. The Koch brothers operation intends to spend $889 million in the run-up to the 2016 elections, a historic sum, no kidding, that in many ways would mark Charles and David Koch and their fellow conservative mega-donors as more powerful than the official Republican Party. Let's continue. Next graphic. The figure more than doubles the amount spent by the Republican National Committee during the last presidential election cycle. More than doubles.
Well, that's it. It's over. I mean, our country is run by a couple hundred guys. And, I mean, look, it was bad enough when the political parties ran it. It's not like we were like, yay, the Republican and Democratic Party are running things, right? And they got money from these same set of guys, but it was limited. They had caps on how much you could,
and then therefore the amount of money given to them by regular people or by unions or by even corporate PACs were more in line with what they could raise from everyone. It was no one had a overwhelmingly clear, embarrassing advantage. You mentioned that it's from a couple hundred guys. Let's just make clear. Let's go on graphic 21 here. The $889 million that the Kochs will raise will be raised from a network of a few hundred donors who attend twice-a-week gatherings like the one at the Ritz. Gatherings known as seminars in Koch world. Seminars. I mean, these guys live in a different planet. Typically run for 3 days and end with pledge sessions during which donors contribute 6 and 7 figures. 7 figures, by the way, that means $1 million at least. 7-figure sums to help fund the advocacy efforts detailed at the meetings, because they just had one here at the Ritz, which at the Rancho Mirage in the desert, a little bit east of Los Angeles. And that's the one that Joe Scarborough just couldn't help himself over because he got free roast beef and foie gras. We'll get to that a little later.
So they have this twice a year. They have it at fancy places, Palm Springs, Colorado, Aspen, yada, yada, right? And all their buddies go. But it's actually the most expensive vacation they take. So the people in the media and the politicians, they don't pay. So it's great. Sometimes Supreme Court justices go. Anthony Scalia's gone, but they don't recuse themselves from cases that involve the Kochs or any of these issues that are brought up by these non-profit groups. They go anyway. But for the people attending, the few hundred donors, they pony up a ton of cash. Now, what's interesting is this makes us nostalgic for the days when the 1% ran the country.
That's right.
The good
old days.
The good old days, right? Because the political parties would take money in the thousands and sometimes tens of thousands of dollars range, and it was capped at a little above $100,000 if you gave every possible thing you could to every candidate and political party you were allowed to, right? So that was the 1% controlling our politics. That was set in motion by Buckley v. Vallejo and Bellotti back in 76, 78. Supreme Court decisions that already shot the horse, right? I mean, they're coming at this horse now. Let me see if I can find the... Now the Kochs are coming in and with their few hundred guys. I'm like, oh, look at that dead horse. Right? I mean, it's a couple of hundred... You have to understand that a couple hundred people is not remotely 1% of the country. It's not 1% of the 1%. It's even smaller. It's smaller than 1% of the 1%, significantly so. And just a couple hundred guys are given nearly $900 million.
Let me scare white people a little bit. Imagine if the future of the country was decided entirely by the men who make up the NBA. Like, that's how many guys we're talking about. You know? I mean, like 300 guys.
So Larry Lessig, great professor at Harvard Law School, godfather of getting money out of politics movement, makes that case. Imagine, he says, any random couple hundred people in the country. Imagine guys named Lester, right? That's a small group. If we just randomly said, the Lesters now run everything, before you even get a chance to vote in the primaries, they will decide who goes into the primaries, because that's what happens with rich people, right? They say, okay, now you're never going to be able to win in a primary unless you got a ton of money. I decide who gets a ton of money, so I decide who you're choosing among. By the way, that's how Iran operates, right? They say, okay, we're going to decide who's going to run in your race, and the mullahs have picked, Ahmed Bob and Mehmet Bob, and they're going to run. Okay, probably not their names. And in this case, it's the money primaries. So it's these couple hundred people based on who's the wealthiest in the country. Does that sound like a democracy to you?
You mentioned Larry Lessig, professor at Harvard. This is number 23, graphic 23. Lessig, obviously, essentially, he gives the incredibly smart guy, I told you so. Here's what Larry Lessig had to say. This is a natural consequence, he says, of regime with essentially no contribution limits, a smaller and smaller number giving larger and larger amounts. Continuing to go backwards, let's go to 22. Mo Alithi of the Democratic National Committee, he's a spokesman there. And it's not like the Democrats are incapable. They could find their own people for this, although there's a fundamental difference between the Democrats, between progressives who would give $889 million because they would be giving it literally against their own interest, and the conservatives who do it. But anyway, here's what Mo Alithi had to say. Wait, you mean a bunch of billionaires are going to spend nearly $1 billion in pocket change to try to buy a president to buy? Wait, you mean a bunch of billionaires are going to spend nearly $1 billion in pocket change to try to buy a president to rig the system for them and then give them massive tax breaks that no one else gets? I'm shocked. But yes, because that's what it is. That's precisely what it is. And continue to show me graphic 24 here, because here's Mark McKinnon, who's a longtime GOP strategist, but also in favor of restricting money in politics. He says for that kind of money, you could buy yourself a president. Oh, right. That's the point.
It's amazing that we allow this. Now, why do you think they're spending $900 million? Now, as Ben points out, there's some progressives who care a lot about climate change and don't want, the planet to melt, and they don't care about their grandchildren, etc. And so they might spend a lot of money for that purpose, right? And some progressives care a lot about the country and say, hey, you know what? You should raise my taxes, right? I'm going against my own self-interest here. I would be paying more into the system, but I think we should, because you know what? In the end, I think that it helps build a bigger middle class. It provides equality of opportunity. Our kids get smarter because they get a better education. And actually, the economy improves. And in the long run, I'll even make more money, okay? But the bottom line is, I want you to do the right thing for the government and for the country. Whereas these guys come in. Now, some people think that the Kochs are just philanthropists.
Yeah, that's right.
And they're doing this out of the goodness of their heart because they believe in the freedom agenda.
Right. They believe in the freedom agenda, and they like Lincoln Center.
Yeah. Now, the reality of it is, if they spend, by themselves, if they spend a couple $100 million on this effort, think about how worth it is, because they each Charles Koch and David Koch, both have over $40 billion each. So if you cut their taxes by a tiny amount, and they don't cut them by a tiny amount, they cut them by a very large amount. You cut them by a tiny amount, it more than pays for all the money that they spent in politics. Right. So these guys are going to spend in perpetuity, not just the Kochs, but the couple hundred guys going to the Ritz, because they think this is the best investment I could possibly do. I bribe some politicians for, okay, it's $900 million is a lot of money to you, but they're going to give us billions and billions in return in just tax breaks, let alone the environmental regulation, let alone destroying the unions and paying less to our workers, all that stuff.
What did Obama talk about in the State of the Union? This modest raise of the capital gains tax from 23.8% to 28%. It's 4.2%. That is hundreds of millions of dollars to these guys, sometimes to each specific guy. So you think it's not worth it for them to bring in the foie gras and the roast beef and to spend 3 days at the Ritz Rancho Mirage? Of course it is. Last little thing on this, 25 here. Ted Cruz, just because we're vilifying the Kochs, and Ted Cruz says that's wrong.
Oh, I love it.
There are a bunch of Democrats, Cruz said, who have taken as their talking point that the Koch brothers are the nexus of all evil in the world. Harry Reid says it every week. Let me be very clear, says Ted Cruz. I think that is grotesque and offensive.
Yeah, no, so Marco Rubio, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, and Scott Walker all went to this thing, and they're vying to see who could pleasure the Kochs and their friends the most, or most effectively, so they'll get the money. I mean, what's happening here is it's so gross. I mean, I almost want to take a shower after I read the article. These politicians groveling at the feet of these billionaires, right? But I was wondering who brought the biggest knee pads. And it turns out it wasn't even close. Ted Cruz, I mean, he is wiping the floor with his knee pads. He's got on a swivel. He practiced all week. He's like, whoa! And he's going around and around trying to get as much as he can. I won't get any more graphic than that, but I think you've seen the image. Okay. So he's like, how dare they? I do to come, my beloved Koch brothers! It's grotesque what's happened to them, and really they're true Americans. They're patriots. He kept talking about how they're patriots, and they. Yeah, come on, man. So, you're so pathetic.
Thankfully, Cenk, as we talk about how these four presidential candidates, Walker, Paul, Cruz, and Rubio, have dropped to their knees to pleasure the Koch brothers and their friends. Thankfully, the media is there to make it clear, to point out to the American public what's really going on here, that this nearly $900 million, nearly $1 billion, could be $1 billion by the time they're done, fairly easily, the dangers that poses to the American people. So Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, they went over the weekend to the Ritz Rancho Mirage, and they let the Kochs have it when they hit the air Monday morning.
We got a break. We need to talk about our weekend.
Oh, it was awesome.
So we actually went out to Palm Springs, where Charles and David Koch had their winter meeting. John Carl was out there as well. We saw a lot of presidential candidates running around, and it's a pretty remarkable event.
That's interesting. Apparently they had, quote, an awesome time, and it was a remarkable event.
So you heard all-you-can-eat shrimp. Remarkable event. We have a longer clip to play of Scarborough talking about it, where the number of either untruths or lies or just getting this information wrong is really staggering. But he says remarkable twice more. So in total, we had 2 minutes and 5 seconds in it, and Joe Scarborough felt it was important to tell us that the Kochs were remarkable 3 times.
Well, I think
125 seconds 3 times.
If they're putting you up at the Ritz-Carlton for a whole weekend, and all the other things that come along with it, if Scarborough runs for office again, you think the Kochs might throw a couple of dollars his way, and all the other issues that involve money in politics, money in media, etc. I mean, these guys are knee deep in it; they're bathing in it. So Mika and Joe are taking a little stroll in that Koch pool.
Well, wait till you hear from Willie Geist and Mark Halperin's there. I don't think he says anything, and Jonathan Carl, and they're all it's great. Yeah. I mean, no one says what needs to be said. Here's JR put this together. Here's the next minute and 50 seconds of Joe Scarborough, one of the good Republicans, embarrassing himself.
And the most remarkable thing was what they were talking about. I sat and talked to Charles a good bit. Charles Koch a good bit. He was obsessed about, just what I said, what I've been saying for some time. Income disparity and mainly crony capitalism. And anybody that thinks that they're loyal, faithful Republicans have never talked to them for more than 3 minutes.
They're libertarian.
They're libertarian. They loathe, even though they did not say this to me, they have no use for people that want to go out and have these huge bloody battles on social issues. And
they're a little anti-establishment.
They're anti-establishment. And the first thing Charles said to me when he saw me was he picked out a specific Republican bill. I said, "How are things going?" He goes, "Well, look what they're passing in Washington. Yeah. They're giving tax subsidies to Hollywood. They're giving tax subsidies to Wall Street. They're giving tax. I mean, this guy is what my good buddy Charlie Hilton would call a true believer. And he's got no use for Republicans that support corporate welfare and no use for Democrats. It's pretty remarkable. They have been painted as cartoon characters.
They're definitely not what you think.
Now listen, they believe in the freedom agenda. They believe in low taxes. They believe in low regulations. They are libertarians. They don't want the federal government in your pocketbook, but they also don't want them in your bedroom. They're like I think most Americans. But very interesting. And Willie, David, of course, we were talking about what he's done in New York and the Upper West Side, and it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, there are many museums or concert halls you can walk into in Manhattan that don't have their names on the
or hospitals.
And medical
hospitals, cancer research, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, they're great. They're awesome. All right, let's all high five each other. That's great. All of them. Alfred, Willie Geist. I don't know who that woman was. And Mika and Joe.
Yeah, so I do declare there are no museums or concert halls you can attend in Manhattan without the Koch brothers' names on it, and we all do love the concert halls in Manhattan. When we go with our, what do they call those things? The
opera glass?
No, monocles. When we all go with our monocles to the play, Well, it's just bloody brilliant that the Koch brothers have put that together for us.
Remarkable.
They're remarkable, really remarkable. Okay, let's just break this down a little bit. So, the freedom agenda. The freedom agenda. Oh, I see. So, when...
By the way, real quick, the efforts that the Koch, when they raise this money, it's actually overseen by the Freedom Partners Chamber of Commerce, a non-profit that organized the Rancho Mirage event. There's no non-profit that organizes an event at the Ritz in Rancho Mirage. Like, that's not
the whole point is profit.
It's not a non-profit that like feeds people or gets women in danger help. Like, that's not a real non-profit.
So the freedom agenda believes in lower taxes. Now, also in that segment, they talked about how the Koch brothers are really bothered by income inequality.
Disparity, said yeah.
No, but wait. When you cut taxes on billionaires, I'm pretty sure that contributes to income inequality. I'm pretty certain that the math on that is solid. And look, in this country,
they're concerned about it. It's not quite enough.
Yeah,
the disparity is too narrow.
That's their concern.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So in this country, we did have a time when we actually did have a golden age, and conservatives even say it was a golden age, 1950s, 1960s, etc., where productivity was fantastic, wage growth was fantastic, income inequality wasn't that bad. Believe it or not, go look back at the history of that and the facts behind that. And the top marginal tax rate varied between 70 to 90%. Okay. That's how you get to income equality and growth. Number one economy in the world at that time. You know why? Because and it's not 90% of everybody's money. It's the very, very top of the top. Meaning that if you're making I think the dollars today would be like $4 million a year. At that point, it kicks to 70 to 90% of your income for every dollar above that.
And,
right?
and nobody paid that, by the way.
Yeah, right. Because very few people, a tiny amount were in that bracket.
But even so, the real, what they actually paid, what's the phrase that people use?
Effective income.
The effective income tax was still much lower. There were always tons of loopholes for those people to shield their money.
Now, the capital gains rate are comically low. All these, and especially the taxes that apply to the rich, are even lower than apply to the average guy. Because, I did investments, so you're supposed to incentivize me. They have $40 billion apiece, Charles and David Koch. They don't need any further incentive to invest their money. Of course they're going to invest their money, right?
If I had $42 billion, I'd think about hiring somebody.
Okay. So, when they talk about this nonsense that, they're against crony capitalism, they're anti-establishment. Come on, man. Are you kidding me?
That was my favorite part, the anti-establishment.
Are the establishment? It's the top richest guys in the country going to the Ritz-Carlton, giving $900 million in campaign donations so that they can buy themselves deregulation, so they can buy themselves lower wages for their workers, so they can buy themselves lower taxes. And they're anti-establishment. Who the fuck is the establishment?
Sometime this year, Jake, somebody on TV, maybe MSNBC, is going to use an inappropriate word to describe a black guy or a gay person or something, and it's going to cost him his job. We all know that's going to happen somewhere, right? And whatever that is, it won't be 1/10 as egregious as what Joe Scarborough just did. Joe Scarborough should lose his job immediately. This is a critically important story for Americans to understand. And not only did he cover it in a boneheaded, ignorant way, he literally repeated their talking points. He did exactly what they would have wanted him to do. They invited him there, so he would turn around and say, and go on the air and say, these guys are anti-establishment libertarians. He essentially said, the guys with $40 billion each who are buying elections around the country are just like me and you. And Joe Scarborough trotted that out, and Willie Geist and Mark Halperin and Mika Brzezinski either added to it or just nodded in agreement.
Yeah, and
that's what you should lose your job for if you work in journalism.
This is supposed to be the progressive network on television.
That's right.
And he does 3 hours in the morning. He has a 3-hour block where he does this program. By going to the Ritz-Carlton to have his expenses paid for, etc., he essentially got paid. I remember when I was at MSNBC, they called around in a panic because Keith Olbermann had given a nickel and a dime to some politician.
They got on Keith. They suspended Keith Olbermann.
They suspended him. They asked me questions. Have you ever given to a politician? These guys went and stayed at the villas and the Ritz-Carltons, etc., of the guys who have fought want all the politicians.
They went on the air and repeated their talking points. You should be fired today. You shouldn't be allowed to go on the air tomorrow. It's unbelievable.
This is the progressive alternative on television. You wonder why people don't trust television anymore. So this is insanity. Oh, I wonder if there's an answer for it, though. Wolfpack, man. I'm telling you, man. You think these guys? Look. You think these guys are going to do it on their own? You think that the Mark Halperins and the Joe Scarboroughs and all these and the politicians who are going there to pleasure the Kochs? At one point, Ted Cruz said, "I admire Charles and David Koch." Yeah, I bet you do. You admire them looking up at them, like, "Hey, I admire you." Okay, so you think those guys are going to fix the system? They're not going to fix it. You got to go to their house and you got to kick the door down. Wolf-pack.com. Come kick it down with me.
Last thing before we go, because it's important to note that the last lie that Joe Scarborough told on behalf of the Koch brothers that should cost him his job. They want the government out of the boardroom and the bedroom. He didn't say the boardroom, but your pocketbook and the bedroom, right? Mm-hmm. So let's remember that. And then this is from Think Progress. While David Koch, this is number 26, while David Koch has publicly supported marriage equality, the duo's political network has almost entirely worked to elect social conservatives who oppose LGBT equality, abortion rights, and access to birth control. Continuing to 27, the Kochs have also spent their money to degrade environmental regulations, workplace safety, and labor protection safeguards that polls suggest, indicate, prove that most Americans want. So to suggest that these guys are on the side of average Americans, there's no greater sin in journalism than what he just did. None greater.
Yeah, and so on a similar point, to say that these guys don't want to be in your bedrooms, but they give more money than anyone else, the politicians who are number one job is getting in your bedrooms, whether it's abortion or it's any of those reproductive rights issues or the issue of marriage equality, gay civil rights, etc. So then David Koch comes out in an interview with Barbara Walters and other puff beats, and he says, "Oh, what? I got no problems with gay. I'm for gay marriage, right? I mean, I've given hundreds of millions of dollars to people who crushed it for decades, but I'm theoretically for it." And Barbara Walters lets him get away with it. Joe Scarborough does his job for him. He's literally his mouthpiece. And these guys are, I mean, you want to talk about grotesque, the word that Ted Cruz mentioned, that's grotesque, right? And here is corruption at its finest. And finally, from my point of view, Joe Scarborough said, anyone who's spent 3 minutes with the Koch brothers will tell you, I can't believe anybody would say that they're pro-Republican. Well, okay, two things on that. First of all, if they're not pro-Republican, they got a funny way of showing it, since they have literally given billions over this set of elections, billions of dollars to exclusively the Republican Party.
Yeah, somebody should tell Marco Rubio, Scott Walker, Rand Paul, and Ted Cruz this.
Yeah, they're not pro-Republican. I wonder why all the Republican presidential candidates showed up. And then number two, yeah, Joe, no, we don't get to spend 3 minutes with the Koch brothers. Okay, the average guy doesn't get to. Oh, I can't believe Joe from Nebraska. I mean, if you'd spent 3 minutes with the Koch brothers, you would know. Who does that? You do that because they need to buy you off, so you say their bullshit on air, which you just oblige them. That's why you got to spend 3 minutes with them. They're billionaires. They're not spending time with the frickin' masses.
Yeah, and so you know what the masses should do is something that Joe Scarborough doesn't understand, never understood, couldn't possibly understand. Odd that he has a job at a network that espouses to do journalism. The rest of us not being able to spend 3 minutes with the Koch brothers, we just follow the money. We follow that $2 billion, what will now be almost certainly $3 billion by the conclusion of the 2016 election. Follow the money, you know who the Koch brothers are.
Chair, did you want to say something?
I just remember Ben was asking about the unidentified woman in that was Nicole Watts. I don't know who.
Oh, there was. I thought she was on ABC. Jenks.
Yeah, she's on The View, and also and then she's on Scarborough's show sometimes. Yeah.
Oh, look at her.
I mean, former communications chief for
Bush's communications chief.
Scarborough's got no sense at all, man. I mean, if I met George Soros, which I never have, I don't know how he's giving me all this money when he's never met me. Never got a dime from the dude. I'm right here. But anyway, if I met George Soros, can you imagine I come on the Young Turks? I'm like, George Soros is really being misunderstood. If you'd spent 3 minutes with him, like,
You wouldn't have said that.
Of course I wouldn't have said that because I know you didn't spend how the fuck would you spend 3 minutes with George Soros? I can't spend 3 minutes with George Soros and people claim I take money from him. I never even met the dude. So,
but you cash his checks, don't you?
I wish I did. God damn, they got no sense at all. All right, but they'll keep their job, and this merry-go-round will go around and around. That's why every time I go to Washington now, I think, man, somebody find me an apple cart because I can't wait to fucking kick it over. Wolf-pack.com. We'll be right back. All right, back on the outskirts. Let me read a couple of quick tweets. Emily Vandermill says, "Yay, it's a Ben Mac day!" Exclamation point. Okay.
I didn't care until she threw in the exclamation point.
At Ben Mank 77, by the way, is his Twitter account. Mike says, "Seriously, Jank started on time and the desk in front of him is neat? Who is this imposter?" Julia Mahoney says, "This is why I come to watch TYT live. Someone has to have this vital waffle debate, and then only Jank will do it."
He didn't have it by himself.
That's right.
I had the waffles last night and this morning.
So you have waffle.
By the way, would you go to a place for waffles, or did you make them at home?
Make them at home.
Oh, dude, I mean Eggo.
Hey, Ben, how you doing? It's nice to meet you. I'm Jake.
No, you put Eggos in the fucking toaster.
Not capable of that. Cereal is the only thing I can make at home. Ruth Iverson says, now I want waffles. Should I eat them or not? I can't decide. I keep waffles. That's a joke after my own heart, although it should actually get a... Alright, and there's a lot of great Coke tweets, but I can't get rid of the image that I put into my own head about Ted Cruz doing a pinwheel.
Like on a Lazy Susan.
The hashtag Ted Cruz pinwheel. People will have no idea what we're talking about, but it's a sad but fun image. All right, next.
So I like this story. There's not a lot to it other than just a sign that a Republican who some people thought was moderately sane is instead decided to imitate the Soviet-era news agency TASS, or the Soviet newspaper Pravda. Indiana Governor Mike Pence, who looks like the presidential candidate from a shitty movie, is starting a state-run news agency that will have pre-written stories offered to hand out to news organizations. So it's going to be called, because it's Indiana, Just In, with the IN capitalized.
Oh, clever.
Yeah, so the news service it says here, the new news service will sometimes offer stories about Pence's administration. Sure, it'll be entirely fair and balanced, considering they will have written them themselves. Let's go to graphic 11 here. At times, though, Just In will break news, publishing information ahead of any other news outlet. Strategies for determining how and when to give priority to such exclusive coverage remains under discussion. Then continuing, just to give you an idea of who will be in charge of this, a governance board of communications directors will oversee the agency. The editorial board will be made up of Pence's communications team, and McCleary, who's his head of communications.
Oh, I see. Well, then I'm glad they chose an impartial board.
Yeah. So, by the way, it says here, a big part of Just In's audience will be small news outlets in the state, like the Portland Commercial Appeal, that's in Indiana, and the publisher of that is a guy named Jack Ronald. He called it, because this is again for him, and he was like, oh, great, this is a ludicrous idea. That's a direct quote from him. Here's number 14. I have no problem, he says, with public information services. The Purdue University's Agriculture Extension Service does a great job. You were just saying that yesterday, Jack.
Yeah, I was.
But the notion of elected officials presenting material that will inevitably have a pro-administration point of view is antithetical to the idea of an independent press. No shit.
But to me, there's a sign of the times, because I think they got to the point where they're like, hey, listen, we write out this stuff, and they pretty much print it out for us anyway, right? The press does oftentimes. But sometimes they're a pain in our ass and tweak a couple of words after our press releases. So why don't we just skip the middleman and just go straight to doing the press ourselves?
Right, and
because in the night, I feel like even 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, but like this would have been like, are you mental? Like it wouldn't, like they wouldn't.
But now it flies, man. I mean,
yeah, now it's a reason they're having a conversation about it.
And why not trick people so that when they go online for information about this, that instead of seeing from the office of Governor Mike Pence, which even to a fairly naive reader of news, they'll think, oh, well, this is just what the government's news has been doing. Let's build a fake news organization. We just did a story on Joe Scarborough at MSNBC. We can't leave them out, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll build a fake news organization. Instead of coming from the governor's office, you'll think you're reading a news story. Our press releases, which we already write now, and which they sometimes print all of, sometimes they interpret it, which is the worst, right? Let's just put our press release and write it like a news article and create a website that seems like a real news organization like the AP, called Just In, a breaking Indiana news organization, and we'll just filter our news that way, and we will literally fool people. That's what they're trying to do, is fool people in Indiana.
And in the past, this would have been unthinkable, but now it is within the realm of conversation, and so they think we're only going, 5%, 10%, 25%. further than than the place we're already at. So, I mean, in the old days, the watchdog media, which did exist for some period of time in America, would have ripped them to shreds for this. They would have been a laughing stock. Now, there's plenty of people making fun of them online in progressive circles, etc., but that'll die down, and then they'll put out their fake press releases, and then it'll look like any other press release, and it'll be perfectly, indistinguishable. And the good people of Indiana, if they ever knew at all, which probably they didn't, right? They'd simply a blip in the news in Indiana, will eventually start to get news stories from this just in, and they'll be like, oh, this just in, okay, and they can't tell that from anything else.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's what they want, and for all that we do to bemoan journalism, I mean, Mike Pence is recognizing it, and they're filling that hole. I made fun of him in the beginning, but the more we talk about the story, you realize that, yeah, this is, and as you pointed out, this is smart. This is good politics.
It'll probably work to some degree.
It'll work to some degree. Hopefully, it'll get the dander up significantly of real reporters in Indiana.
So when he does, in fact, run for president, either in a bad movie, which is an excellent call, because he does look like a character who would run for president, but then he would be secretly evil.
Totally. Yeah.
Right? Pretty fitting. I thought you were going to say run for movie in the president in the Lego movie.
Oh.
Where, of course, he would be opposed by Ben Nelson.
Ben Nelson is a Lego character, no question. All right, so the storm of the century didn't exactly happen. And instead of being pleased that it didn't debilitate the financial capital of the world, many, at least on the right, have decided to rip the people, the leaders, the governor of New Jersey, who, by the way, is a Republican, and the mayor of New York, for over-preparing. They're not weathermen. The weather guys said it was going to be bad, so they seem to have reasonably prepared for a storm that turned out to be just a bad winter storm and nothing more. Rush Limbaugh has taken that little bit of information and the fact that we all know since the dawn of time, since as long as I've been alive, since as long as Jenkins has been alive, weather forecasters sometimes get it wrong because it's not called a backcast, it's forecast. You don't know what it's going to be ahead of time. Rush Limbaugh, he's conspiracy.
Just like I'm paying attention to this, and I see record of all time blizzard is being forecast. And then I see this idiot mayor on TV telling everybody this could be, might be, likely will be the absolute worst blizzard in the history of blizzards in New York. I was just trying to think last night, trying to recall a couple instances where they forecast something that's going to be really, really bad, and it hasn't even come close to being, not even close to bad, much less really, really bad. And not just in New York, but elsewhere around the country. It's been a horrible, horrible year for forecasting.
So, horrible year for forecasting, which, by the way, is, of course, just going to be a thing he says and then doesn't refer to. We have no idea whether it's been a bad year for forecasting. I spent a lot of time in local television, 8 years of my life in local TV. Forecasting has gotten fantastic. I mean, almost invariably. You look at what they say the weather's going to be. It is. They couldn't get a storm. I was listening to a meteorologist today, which I don't think Rush Limbaugh did, that when a storm gets closer, the forecasting cone usually gets narrow and narrower. You see clearly. This one did the opposite. It kept getting wider and wider to predict where it went as it got closer, which was a peculiarity of the storm, and certainly I think the southwest part of the storm. That happens. Yeah. It happened here.
When we were growing up, we didn't have the Doppler 4000,
right,
or the Doppler, whatever, 8 million, or whatever they're on, right, at this point. And so, of course, it's gotten a little bit better, but he's old school, and he can't escape his own context. He's like, they keep saying that the snowstorms are going to hit the East Coast, but I'm sitting here in West Palm Beach, and there hasn't been a single snowstorm.
So he talked about the idiot mayor of New York, and the idiot mayor of New York definitely has some answering to do. I mean, listen to this. This is number 6.
Get off the roads, get off the streets, get off the sidewalks as this emergency deepens. This will most likely be one of the largest blizzards in the history of New York City. I'm asking everyone to understand that and to prepare accordingly.
It's outrageous.
How dare he?
Yeah.
Okay. So a couple things here. First of all, this reminds me of when they warned us about hurricanes when we lived in Miami. And I remember the weatherman saying, I need you to stop your party attitude and get off the streets. Okay, literally. One of my favorite quotes. And he was right. I did have a party attitude. I was drinking and I had just been in the streets. So now you say that because a hurricane or a blizzard might do a lot of damage and might cost you your life if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, as it turned out, in that particular case in Miami, we didn't have a terrible hurricane. In this case, they didn't have a terrible blizzard. And in 2005 in New Orleans, it turns out they did have a terrible hurricane.
Well, it's interesting because Rush Limbaugh gets into that. I was going to do 3A next, but let's go to 4 next because Cenk brings up Hurricane Katrina, and Rush Limbaugh skips some of the things that happened in between and goes right to Katrina to prove his crazy conspiratorial point.
After Hurricane Katrina, look at the very next hurricane season. Global warming was responsible for Katrina, and that meant Katrina was just the first of many that were going to follow. And they were all going to be bad, each one worse than the one before it. It's just part of global warming. There hasn't been a major hurricane landfall in this country in 3,000 freaking days. But part and parcel of the left taking over is, okay, you got to forecast me it's going to rain.
Hasn't been one in 3,000 freaking days. He's talking about Category 4 or 5 hurricanes. Sandy hit. It caused a $68 billion worth of damage.
Yeah, sorry, man. That was Category 3. So the $68 billion doesn't count.
Doesn't count. You don't even get to recoup anything on it.
Right. And so the same Rush Limbaugh, of course, characterized Governor Christie of New Jersey when Superstorm Sandy hit as a hero. Right. So, because he was properly prepared. Now, during this same exact blizzard that we're talking about here with the idiot mayor of New York, the equally idiot governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, also told people to get off the streets, said almost verbatim the same exact thing as de Blasio did without as much of a fun sign language person on the scene.
The most important issue of the day today is the health and safety of the people of New Jersey, said Chris Christie. How dare he? Let's play number 8 next. This is, in fact, exactly what Chris Christie had to say.
This is going to be a significant storm with snowfall today and into tomorrow that will create really hazardous conditions, including dangerous conditions on our roadways. So I have declared a state of emergency in New Jersey.
Idiot. I mean, de Blasio and Christie said exactly the same thing.
Right. So now look, here's why they have to over-prepare, if anything. Okay, one, because it's a cautious thing to do, right? So if it turns out it doesn't hit, maybe you're a tiny little bit embarrassed, although it has nothing to do with you, the meteorologist, or the people who told you that you were going to get 2 feet of snow. But if it does hit and you're not adequately prepared, oh boy, then you're going to reap the whirlwind. I mean, if you thought Rush Limbaugh was tough on de Blasio, I'm curious that he didn't pick the Republican governor of New Jersey, or even the Democratic governor of New York, who's very corporatist to criticize.
He may have mentioned Cuomo also.
Right. So, but mainly hitting de Blasio because then it's so fashionable to hate de Blasio in the right wing. So, my God, if he was underprepared.
Yeah, I mean,
Rush Limbaugh. You see that? These socialists can't do anything right. He can't run the government. Look at what he did with the cops. He can't run the cops. He can't run the city. I mean,
Giuliani did everything right. I mean, he put the Office of the Terrorism Response in the World Trade Center. I mean, he nailed it. Giuliani, he nailed it. Yeah. Let's get the rest of Limbaugh just because the conspiracy is just so great. This is 3A. More Rush Limbaugh.
And the reason is, if I can cut to the quick and get your, the left has corrupted everything. And just like the left has corrupted the professoriate, the faculty at major institutions of higher learning, the left has populated all these bureaucracies. The Department of Commerce runs the National Weather Service. And do not believe that they're not politicized.
The professoriate.
That was already awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me get this conspiracy right.
Yeah.
Because it is. This is not just Rush Limbaugh. So now there's weather truthers out there, and then this is apparently what they do. So the meteorologists fake the weather that's gonna come. Well, then wouldn't they be embarrassed because it's fake? They made it up. I mean, it's their facts as a way of imposing itself. So what's the plan? They say, okay, a horrible storm's gonna come, presumably because of climate change.
Right.
But when it if it doesn't come, isn't that worse for the people who are trying to push climate change?
Fear. They just get the fear into it, so we get scared that it might come. They have to keep reminding us of the dangers because the left is always playing the politics of fear.
Yeah. That's the problem with the left. It's the politics of fear.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And that's what they do. They corrupt the government, and all the way down to the Dopplers. And they're down in the Dopplers, fixing what's happening with the weather, so that they can trick us into believing that climate change exists based on facts.
Right. I mean, you're exactly. You proved his conspiracy by pointing out that it doesn't. When the storm doesn't come, the conspiracy is rendered useless. But Rush just went over a litany of things. He ripped Bill de Blasio. He blamed it on the leftist conspiracy, the same one that's taken over the professoriate. By the way, an argument that you were waiting for them to make for a long time when the professors, the people sort of most educated about a subject, keep being more progressive than they are. Mm-hmm. Sometimes more progressive than anybody, but certainly more progressive than Limbaugh and Hannity and Fox and all those guys. So they have to say, don't listen to them. They've been corrupted by the left. Now, when the meteorologists and when the climate change scientists say, no, climate change is real, we have to do something else, they say, no, they've been corrupted by the left. Don't listen to them. Rush Limbaugh's core point since the mid-'80s has been the same. Don't listen to experts. Don't read. And don't think. And I'll tell you when to be afraid, and I'll tell you who's lying to you. It's really terribly dangerous. Like, he's very easy to make fun of, but he is a dangerous demigod. And then he went off and talked about the nanny state, too. So he left the conspiracy point and then just turned it into the left wants to tell us what to do and control us and tell us when we can walk safely on the streets, tell us when we should shovel the snow out of our driveway, tell us what schools to go to. I mean, he didn't really have a point. He made all his crazy points, some of them actually dangerous.
Do you not want the government to tell you if there's a dangerous storm coming? Nanny state telling me my house is going to get ripped apart in a tornado. Well, I don't need your help, okay? I'll stay right in the middle of the tornado. I don't need your goddamn nanny state. Yeah, isn't that like a core function of the government to protect you? I thought even conservatives agreed with that. If there's a freaking tornado or a hurricane or a blizzard coming, yeah, I'd like to know. Then I can make up my own mind on whether I'm going to go somewhere else or I'm going to go to the basement or whatever, right? But at least let me know, yes.
I'd like to see, we're going to develop it in the next segment, the final segment, we'll do a story on Sam Brownback, the incompetent governor of Kansas. I mean, he's just factually incompetent. But I guess that when it comes to be tornado season, that Sam Brownback will probably deactivate the tornado warning system.
Because, you don't want a nanny.
I don't want a nanny. I don't want to be a nanny to the good people of Kansas.
What do you think you are, Brownback? My mommy? I don't need you warning me about no goddamn stinking tornadoes. I'm a conservative, right? I'll figure that shit out on my own. What do you think? Is it tornado in there?
All right, we'll talk a little more about Sam Brownback when we come back. Stay with us, Young Turks.
Just like paying attention to this, and I see record.
I was checking Ben with you guys today. Lawless says Rush Limbaugh reminds me of Cartman in South Park. There's truth in that. And then
who reminds him of Cartman?
Rush Limbaugh.
Okay.
Yeah. And so Julia Mahoney pointed out, there was 2 feet of snow in a lot of places in Massachusetts and
New England, where they get that a lot.
Yeah. And so what part of the conspiracy is that? So the conspiracy is, okay, we'll predict 2 feet of snow, and we'll be right in some places and wrong in other places. How fucking stupid are these people?
Journalism Jank took another hit last night. CNN's had the Blizzard Mobile. I don't know if you watched any of this. I did. And the Blizzard Mobile was Don Lemon, who again I like personally, and I'm sure it wasn't his idea, but he was out in the streets of New York saying they were going to go into the storm, and you can't fault them for the storm. They like the city, they prepared for a coverage of a serious storm, but then when it doesn't happen, you've got to be able to pinwheel away and cover something else, or cover the fact that the storm wasn't as bad. It was just a significant winter snowstorm. But they didn't seem able to. And so the Blizzard Mobile drove, at least what I was watching, just drove through the streets of New York where there was like maybe a half inch of snow on the ground. But they were live from the Blizzard Mobile. And in this little brief clip here, Don Lemon forgets his name. That's why people saved it and posted it. But he doesn't really forget his name. He just stumbles. The guy was on the air for forever. He did a fine job. But you just get an idea of what it was, which was nothing. Okay, that's where we'll go. So here's some of so Blizzard Mobile trended on Twitter, as you might imagine, and a couple of my favorite tweets. We'll start with 15. Aaron Gloria Ryan tweeted, "Twist: Don Lemon's Blizzard Mobile rounds a corner and discovers on an empty Manhattan street the missing plane."
Oh, that hurts.
That one definitely hurt. This one was good too. This is 16. The next one, Danny Sullivan. And then you see it. By the way, that's what the shots were like of the Blizzard Mobile. So slightly snowy light. And Danny Sullivan writes, CNN's Blizzard Mobile, or as regular people call it, a car. and Don Lemon was like, hutched in the back, and it looked like a Blair Witch Project. He had his He had with a flashlight to his face. Then Ben Mank 77 wrote, the Blizzard Mobile on CNN currently appears to be in nearly an inch of snow. An inch. I hope they survive tonight. And then this is funny. The last one, also from me, because when you find something good on Twitter, I think you should just repeat it.
Okay,
I discovered this guy, and I think he's smart. So the last one here, 18. TV News has been doing credibility killing inauthentic live shots for decades, but CNN's Blizzard Mobile is taking it to new depths. So, and it's tough because you prepare for it. I understand why they would prepare for it. That was the right decision.
Yeah.
But then when you do it, and when you call it the Blizzard Mobile, when you feel like you have to name it, you really cut into the credibility among people who look to you for some actual value in news. Like, you don't have to name it. Just don't name it.
So, okay. Look, you need some degree of authenticity, and that they can't pull it off. So I'm with you that I'll start out defending Don Lemon. I'm sure it was a producer's idea, and he got... They're like, okay, which poor schmuck should we throw in the car? And they're like, of course, Don Lemon. Of course, right?
And he's game. He's game. He's
that's
totally
why.
game, right?
And they're like, who wants to go on the Blizzard Mobile? There's no way Don Lemon didn't raise this guy. Okay. So, Wolf Blizzard's like, I'm going to stay in the situation. Nice and safe.
The Situation Mobile.
Yeah, okay. So, and Don Lemon to some degree has it coming, and he said ridiculous things on air. But anyway, they put him in there. It's largely not his fault. And once he's in there, he's got to do the whole broadcast from there, no matter what the situation is. And so now then he's doing Deflategate. He's having conversations about other things, except he's Blair Witching it. And he's like, it's really dark out here. Like, what do you guys think about the balls the Patriots are using?
See, and that's the thing.
It's so weird.
So they're not willing to make the change that the situation requires. And the change that was required was, come on back now.
Yeah.
Put Brooke Baldwin, or she was out there too, but just put somebody else in the anchor desk and do the news.
No. Here's what you do. You say, hey, listen.
By the way, just have Don come back. He was like 10 blocks away.
That's right. I literally thought about him driving back to the studio. I'm like, okay, and look, so let's say at TYT we decided to do this. I mean, it's not outside the bounds of imagination. We're having fun. There's a blizzard, but we decided we're going to have fun with it. We do a blizzard mobile, but we'd be tongue-in-cheek. We'd be, ha-ha, right? Anyway, we get out there and there's no blizzard. First report we'd have is, there's no blizzard! There's no blizzard! So we shouldn't have done this. That's all right. I'm going to drive back. Ben's in the studio. He's got it for the next half an hour, and I'll join him in the next half an hour because there's no goddamn blizzard and it's fucking obvious.
Right.
Okay, just say it. Just say that's all, and then that's how you become authentic. If you say things that are obvious and true.
And don't name it the Blizzard Mobile.
Unless you're joking. Come on. I mean...
Right, but if you're joking, you're not CNN.
That's what I'm saying. Like, Daily Show would call it Blizzard Mobile.
Really?
We might call it Blizzard Mobile. CNN, you can't not have your tongue in your cheek if you're calling it the Blizzard Mobile. It sounds absurd.
Don Lemon is driving around in the eye of the storm. That's it. Just do that. Anyway, are we doing Sam Brownback?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, we'll do this quickly. So Sam Brownback, the governor of Kansas, is... Talk amongst yourselves.
Okay. He's a bad guy. Ben's going to let you know what kind of a bad guy he is.
So Sam Brownback is now distancing himself from Sam Brownback. So it's a tough thing to do, but only a guy like Sam Brownback could possibly get away with saying that he's not really that Sam Brownback. So he has been advocating and campaigning on tax cut after tax cut after tax cut. Somehow he was able to get himself reelected in 2014. Well, not somehow. It's Kansas, and Republicans won everywhere, and he won there. He is looking at a projected budget deficit of $280 million in this fiscal year, followed by $436 million in the next fiscal year, solely because of his reckless tax cut after tax cut after tax cut. He even is having trouble convincing the Chamber of Commerce that he's done the right thing because they are looking at massive budget shortfall. So he gets up today, or this week, or I guess today, and spoke to the Greater Topeka Chamber of Commerce, and he explained that those tax cuts were basically not his fault. Here is graphic one. I proposed a flat tax, said Brownback, with a small budget accelerator, but what I got from the legislator, those hacks, was a naked tax cut with none of the pay-fors. I took it because it was the best I could possibly hope for. Now, let's compare that, if we could, to Sam Brownback earlier. First, and graphic 2 is from 2012. This is what Sam Brownback had to say. My faith is in the people of Kansas, not the government's ability to tax and redistribute. Today's legislation will create tens of thousands of new jobs and help make Kansas the best place in America to start and grow a small business.
Okay, now, this is awesome. So, first of all, when you have a Republican blaming someone else for tax cuts, you know they screwed up.
Yeah, the tax cuts did not work.
Right. Now, I mean, normally, have you ever seen a Republican? I'm not sure I've seen it in my lifetime where a Republican was like, hey, it wasn't me that did the tax cuts.
Yeah.
I mean, he called them naked tax cuts.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, I thought you guys loved the naked tax cuts. I thought you liked them, the more you see of the tax cuts, Johnson, the happier you were. But all of a sudden, you're against naked tax cuts. It's no, it's a goddamn legislature.
And to blame the legislature when you're Sam Brownback, which of course he couldn't do during the election because that would seem incredibly weak. So as he ran up to this, try to win here, he was still taking credit for them as recently as 2014. Here's graphic 3. This is Sam Brownback in 2014. We've done this now, he says, for 3 years in the face of so many people saying you can't do this. There have been a number of naysayers on the other side of the aisle saying this is not going to work. And it is working. Except, no, it wasn't. And everyone knew it wasn't. And now you're looking at $280 million fiscal year deficit, $440 million next year.
Sam Brownback would have won me back entirely with one simple statement. You know how I told you about the naysayers and how they said this wouldn't work? Well, it turns out they were right.
They were
My
right.
bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
I regret it. I'm sorry. And I'm sorry. That was just my mistake and my bad. I'm sorry.
Okay. And I shouldn't have done the tax cut. Obviously, I pushed for the tax cut. Unless you're blind, deaf, and dumb in Kansas, you knew it was my idea. Right? We did it. Oops. We can't fill the hole in the deficit, and somebody's got to fill my hole.
Well, so maybe filling the hole of accepting responsibility would be to protect their governor. You would think maybe the Republican leader in the Senate and in the House, but that's not what happened. Here's Ali Belli, this is graphic 4, the spokeswoman for the Senate President Susan Wagle. She's a Republican of Wichita. She said she couldn't comment on the governor's remarks because Wagle wasn't in her current role when the cuts passed in 2012. Okay, not me. I don't know anything about it. And then go right to graphic 5. This is a direct quote from the Kansas House Speaker, who is echoing that previous sentiment. When the tax plan was signed into law, I wasn't in my current position as Speaker of the House. However, there's a problem before us, and I plan to solve it together with some very bright and capable members in the House.
I love politicians, man. He's not saying he didn't vote in favor of it. He just said, I wasn't in my current position as Speaker of the House.
I was in the House.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the House. I voted for it. I'm not saying, but at the time, So all these guys backpedaling away from tax cuts. Now, one of the reasons they're doing that is they've become deeply unpopular. For not only because they created the budget deficit, but now in order to fix that problem, they're cutting education to the bone. And they've cut hundreds of millions of dollars from education in Kansas. People are not that happy because, the thing is, even if you're a Republican in Kansas, guess what? You want your kids to go to a decent school and get a decent education so they can have some opportunity to do well, so one day they too can get tax cuts, right?
Interesting progress, to Jack's point. Rather than graphic 6, rather than retreat from the massive tax cuts that are crippling state finances, Governor Brownback wants to cut classroom funding for Kansas schools by $127 million. And his second method to pay for it, he has 3 actually. So 1, cut the schools by $127 million, push pension fund payments off into the future. Go right to graphic 7 for me. And then another big ticket Brownback cut strips nearly $300 million in transportation department funding over the next couple of years. Everyone, including the transportation experts in Kansas, say this stuff has to be paid for. You're just going to have to pay for it down the road. You're going to have to pay more for it.
Yeah, especially on the pensions, they become more expensive the more you push it down the road. Okay. Now, there's actually a fourth one not mentioned in those articles that I've read in previous articles, and that's actually tax increases. Wait a minute.
Oh, he has 2 tax increases.
Right. So what are the tax increases? First of all, he can't call them tax increases because he's a Republican. So in the past, they came up with a new word for it. They're revenue enhancements.
Huh?
Oh, I see. Okay, you're just enhancing revenue. It's not tax. So now he cut taxes on the rich and he cut taxes on corporations. Got rid of tax on corporations entirely.
His goal, by the way, is to reduce the tax to 0.
The income tax
to 0.
So how's he going to make it up for? Well, he's got to raise revenue somehow, right? So he's going to increase taxes on you. So
but
sales tax.
Only the poorest of you.
That's right. The sales tax goes up, and so when it does, what happens? A much larger percentage of the income of the poor and the middle class goes to things that they buy, like food, etc., right, that they need. Whereas the rich, it's a tiny percent. That mac and cheese is a tiny percentage of their budget, but it's a much bigger percentage of your budget. So you actually pay much more in taxes to make up for all the tax cuts that the rich got under Brownback. So as Brown backpedals out of here and pretends he didn't do the tax cuts, well, you know that in fact, of course, he did. And even if he's right, it was the Republican legislature who did it with him. So if you're going to keep voting for him, and they're going to ironically increase your taxes to pay for the tax cuts for the rich,
almost nobody.
You have no one to blame but yourself if you live in Kansas. You just reelected him.
What's the matter with Kansas? No state exemplifies voting against your own interests more right now than regular people in Kansas. And by regular people, I mean literally 98% of the people in Kansas. So his biggest tax cut increase right now is a huge increase in cigarette taxes and on alcohol. Cigarettes and alcohol. Who's going to feel that? I mean, rich people are going to be fine with that little tax, but people who use cigarettes and alcohol regularly, there might be a case to be made for a health benefit that it's a good decision. But obviously, this is as regressive a tax as you can get. So who's against this? Grover Norquist is against it. This is graphic 9. Grover Norquist says a pack-a-day smoker in Kansas would end up paying an extra, listen to this, $547.50 a year in taxes. Kansans living along the Missouri border may opt to avoid the tax altogether by purchasing the tobacco products in Missouri, where the tax would be even lower. Continuing to graphic 9B, if consumers flock to businesses across state lines, they make other purchases while shopping for tobacco, hurting the bottom lines of Kansas retailers. So you've managed to alienate Grover Norquist, who, as you see there, do we have that?
Americans for Tax Reform.
No, but put any one of the Grover Norquist quotes up there because I very specifically labeled it. Yeah, nutty anti-tax activist Grover Norquist.
Nobody's in favor of tax cuts more than Grover Norquist is, and you even lost him. Now, of course, one of the reasons is he will claim he's doing it on principle because he doesn't want taxes on the poor and the middle class. That's not usually been the case with Republicans. They don't really care about that. They will increase your taxes without thinking of blinking on it. But Grover Norquist also represents tobacco companies, alcohol companies who don't like the extra taxes on their products.
No, he's pure.
Right.
He's pure.
So, and then finally, on this issue of Missouri and Kansas, I want to quote the Kansas City Star from a couple of weeks ago. They explained on that day that at 9 a.m. Tuesday, the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics released a report showing how jobs had grown in metropolitan areas across America. Unfortunately for Brownback, the report showed that the Missouri side of the state line had gained jobs at 4 times the rate of the Kansas side. So this whole idea was, don't worry, we'll cut taxes on the rich, but then it'll create jobs. Turns out, no, it didn't. Kansas has one of the lowest growth rates in the country, and in fact, he had specifically said, we'll get so many more jobs than Missouri. Oops, Missouri got 4 times as many jobs.
Yeah, and Colorado and Oklahoma all doing better too. Finally, graphic 8B. Let's just hear this because this is the key mention of the Kansas City Star. Kansas City Star endorsed him in 2010. So it's not some liberal paper. They endorsed him in 2010. In 2014, not surprisingly, they endorsed Paul Davis because the budget shortfall was astronomically horrible. Davis, by the way, all he did was court Republicans in that. He was nominally the Democrat. So anyway, here's graphic 8B. The Kansas, it says, will continue to stagger from the Brownback tax cuts. The governor, meanwhile, continues to tell Kansas that his low tax strategy will result in a booming economy one of these days.
One of these days. Steve, real quick.
Real quick. I mean, we all know what a joke it is that Republicans are so-called fiscally conservative. They're so full of shit. So just in California, when Schwarzenegger left office, a Republican, he left the state with a $25 billion deficit. And now under Jerry Brown, who's a grown-up, who understands that you need to have some tax increase, some cuts in services, you need to do things in a smart way and not just randomly cut everything. Now we have $4 billion surplus.
Yeah, I know, and I mean,
grown-ups versus children.
And you can take it nationally. I mean, say what you want about Barack Obama and the enormous disappointment compared to George W. Bush. It's a grown-up versus child debate, and the economy is not filtered down to regular Americans in a successful enough way, but it's doing a lot better than it was in 2008.
Yeah. All right. I want to end on a non-related point. Ben was saying during the break that maybe the conservatives don't need to be warned about tornadoes. Going to the previous story. Because maybe once a tornado comes, they can shoot it.
Yeah.
Right? And I hadn't thought of that. And I like the imagery of a conservative in Kansas.
Sam Brownback shutting down the early warning system for tornadoes.
Yeah. And here comes a tornado. Oh, yeah.
You got it, Jay.
Yeah, now show that tornado. Now you come around here and say, oh, you know. All right, we're having fun. All right, awesome. Second hour coming up. Jake, Anna, Ben. Oh, that's very sweet. Tara Adams writes, when Jake and Ben are together, it's magic. Forget the power panels. I don't know about forgetting the power panels, but thank you for that compliment. We appreciate it. Hysteric Raider says, quickly, Lemon, to the Blizzard Mobile. Roll the 60s Batman theme. Here comes Lemon.
Let me read one because I said, Anna, before we got to the last story that made us so over, I said, are we doing Sam Brownback? And Dubmaster C writes, are we doing Sam Brownback? But that's how I got chlamydia the second time.
Ari Noss makes a good point. Isn't Kansas historically one of the centers of populism in the U.S.? How times have changed? That is unfortunately a really good point. You're right, it used to be, and now it's become the center of Coke Industries. Let's not forget that that's where the Cokes are from. So, oh, look at that, tax cut for the wealthy in Kansas.
But the Cokes don't support Republicans.
Oh, no, but they're not pro-Republican, so I'm sure that had nothing to do with it. And finally, Mugatu says, Brownback is the worst politician, kick the can down the road, and when the House of Cards collapses, not in office, blame the new governor. But that's exactly what they're going to do. And in fact, that's GOP 101. In fact, Roger Ailes was part of the administration that wrote that memo for Richard Nixon, saying, "Spend all you want during Republican administrations, and then when you get into office, when you're out of office, blame it on the Democrats and complain about deficits." And that's exactly, or as the British would say, literally, what they have been doing for the last 40, 50 years, right? And you look at, I just looked at the chart the other day. Ben was talking about this right before the end of the break, where you see a chart of the deficits as a percentage, right? Boom. Reagan. Bush, the first Bush, it levels off a little bit and goes back up, okay? Under Clinton, boom, falls like a rock, right? And the reason I saw this chart is because Kasich is making this argument. He's a Republican governor of Ohio, but he was the head of the budget committee under Clinton, during the Clinton years, right? And so then under Bush, the second, boom, deficits take off again. Under Obama, boom, they fall. Gee, I wonder who's good at deficits and budgets and who's not. Yet, you ask an average American, because of the propaganda and the marketing that they have done, Republicans are good on budget and the Democrats are bad. It is one of the greatest fictions perpetrated on the American people, and the people who are complicit in that is the media, because every time that comes up, they should say, any reasonable journalist should say, whoa, 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 let's look at the facts. The facts are, Republican administrations have been horrific on budget issues, and the Democrats have been reasonably good to very good, comparatively. Yeah. All right. Casper, what's up?
Hey. You guys ready?
Yes, we are.
All right, let's start. An ex-Army prosecutor has been convicted of rape charges, and this is also an individual who is supposed to oversee all sexual assault allegations within the military. Major Eric J. Burris was found guilty on 2 charges of rape, a charge of forcible sodomy, 4 charges of assault, and a charge of disobeying an order. He's actually been sentenced already to 20 years in prison. He's been dismissed from the service, understandably, in order to forfeit all pay. Now, again, the part of the story that's the most jarring and probably also points to a really big problem in the military is that Burris was one of the people who oversaw allegations of sexual assault within the military. Now, for years, people have been arguing that the military isn't doing enough to address issues of sexual assault and rape. Both men and women are affected by it, and yet a lot of the victims feel that they don't have a certain person to go to get help, because oftentimes they will go to someone who is in a higher position than them, and either they will deny the rape allegations or deny any type of help to the victims, or it'll be someone who's actually carrying out sexual assault themselves. So in this rare case, we see a little bit of justice, and it's disgusting to know that this was the guy who oversaw the prosecutions.
Yeah, and it was multiple victims.
Yeah.
So here's a guy who is, obviously the wolf guarding the hen house here, and we don't know because they won't release it. They're supposed to, but the military is notorious in how late they release information about stuff like this, as to whether he went after the people who came in to get help. We don't know.
Yeah, it's he was the chief of military justice for the 82nd Airborne, incredibly high-profile position, famed paratrooper division. Sort of whose exploits are famous during World War II. Kicked off D-Day with 101st Airborne. But it's just something is uncomfortable about a high-profile case. It happens. He was not tried at Guantanamo Bay. He was tried at the federal courthouse that's there on the base in North Carolina, but you can't go without prior approval. And eventually they'll release it, right? But we don't know what happened. I mean, he pled not. Look, there are multiple victims, and I'm buying no conspiracy here. But is it possible that he was leading some charge against prosecuting officers for sexual misconduct, and they framed him? That's a crazy thing to say. I don't believe it. But when you make it so we can't even see what happens, and we don't even know what his defense was, and he probably didn't even raise that as a defense, then we should just be able to see it's America, for crying out loud. I get it. He's in the military. Maybe we can't have everything, but we got to have some basics here to be able to go look.
Yeah, I don't see the
benefit of it.
The value or the upside of keeping this stuff hidden. I mean, it's our military. It's not like the military is in a part of a different country, right? So, if they, for example, the military says, "Hey, I can't let you guys know which way my troops are going to move to get the boss from." Yeah, everybody understands that. Of course, we should keep that secret, right? We're not knuckleheads. But if you already convicted the guy, you should let us know what he did, right?
Yeah.
Because it's you have to be accountable to us. It's our military.
Yeah, the military gets to abide by completely different rules and completely different standards, which is part of the reason why sexual assault is such a huge problem within the military. You know, oftentimes people will have to go to someone who's in a higher position than them within the military, and there's this almost like, it's like a fraternity mentality where you kind of look out for your own and you just kind of doubt the victim. And a lot of times, by the way, the victims are, yes, women, but there are a lot of male victims who have, you know, been raped in the military, and it's rarely ever covered or talked about. And it's crazy to know that this continues to happen and there isn't any real change. The way that they report the rape or the way that they're expected to report the rape hasn't changed.
We talked about last week as far as the sniper stuff and why we have a certain respect, which we should, for a lot of military people. And I think it's put in us, and also I think it applies to this. They want to keep it not because of this safety factor, but because they don't want people to not join. The people that would be willing to. They don't want this air of, oh man, bad things happen in the military, I'm not joining. Like they already have to worry about recruitment already enough. They don't want any negative tone to come to the general public that may think, oh, if I join, I can be respected no matter what I do. People are going to respect me when I walk through the airport with my uniform on. And, you know.
Yeah, and it's ironically the same thing why a lot of campuses don't report it as much as they should. Because then people won't come to Dartmouth. I just make up a random name there. But people won't want to join the 82nd Airborne if they know that the guy who's supposed to be protecting them is actually raping them, right? But the thing is, all this stuff grows in the darkness, the bad stuff, the toxic stuff. And the way to cure it is the sunlight. It's not more darkness. As Bane would say, I was born in darkness. Sorry. Just to end a really serious story on a terribly goofy note. You merely adopted it.
All right, we have some good news for 2014. 2014 saw a record number of exonerations, and this is according to the National Registry of Exonerations. This is a University of Michigan Law School project that they have been working on, and the numbers will show you that there are lots of people in the country that confess to crimes that they do not commit. Now, just to give you the numbers, there were 125 known exonerations in 2014, and that's up 37% from the 91 in both 2013 and 2012. Unsurprisingly, the state with the highest number of exonerations was Texas, with 39, followed by New York, 17, Illinois, and Michigan at 7 each. Now, just to give you a sense of how many people have been executed in Texas during the last two governorships, under Bush, and remember, he was governor for only 5 years, he was governor while 152 people were executed. Perry, 278.
Unbelievable. So more than 2 a month were executed under George Bush.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and of course, Rick Perry famously, when asked about, do you lose any sleep over the people that were put to death under your watch, said, absolutely not. I got a rousing ovation during one of the Republican primary debates.
And George Bush laughed at Carla Faye Tucker.
That's right. She's a woman who was put to death.
He mocked her, please. And she had very clearly reformed herself in prison, and I'm not suggesting she should have gotten out, but she was had converted and was a born again Christian, ministering to other inmates, and pleaded for her life, and he mocked her plea. Like a serious guy.
Yeah. So sometimes when I'm reading an article like this, it'll say the state that leads, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll almost physically do it, raise my hand like, ooh, I know. Right? Yeah, it's going to be Texas. We all knew it was going to be Texas. Of course it is. Now, here's the thing, right? These are exonerations. So hear it from me, who was pro-death penalty. We've been doing this show a long time. Ben has seen me multiple times argue in favor of the death penalty.
One with Mario Cuomo.
Yeah, a very long debate I had with Mario Cuomo on this show back about a decade ago, right? And I changed my mind because it's one thing to want to kill people you think you're certain did it. It's another thing to kill people that didn't do it. So I can't. I've never talked to an actual human being who's in favor of the death penalty. And when you say, hey, look at all these people who've been let go, I mean, unbelievable numbers of people who've been let go who turns out they were innocent. They didn't do it. Did you want to kill them as well?
Yeah.
Nobody ever says, like, oh, yeah, sure, that was fine. I wanted to kill them too.
Yeah.
Right? So, but that's the thing. Now, nobody even has that debate anymore. Right? In the Republican primaries, like, gay, should we kill more people, right or wrong? And then, because of Dukakis, the Democrats run for the hill, right? They don't want to get talking about the death penalty, and so we don't have the debate. But this is ridiculous. How can you be in favor of killing innocent people?
I know, but oftentimes the question isn't framed the way that you framed it, right? No one ever asked, would you execute someone right or wrong, right? We don't have the discussion on how many people get exonerated. We don't talk about how many wrongful convictions there are. We don't talk about how many innocent people have already been executed for crimes they did not commit, right? Those facts never come up. All the issues and debates are very black and white, and that's the problem. Like, Republicans want to seem like they're tough on crime, and so they're like, yeah, pro-death penalty. They don't talk about nuance, and that's a really big issue. Especially when you consider that a lot of these people who have been exonerated confess to crimes that they didn't commit. And then people will say, well, what? They confessed to it, right? They either did the drug trafficking or they murdered someone or they did an armed robbery. But in reality, oftentimes when they're going through an interrogation process, they will be told things that will force them or coerce them into admitting to a crime that they didn't commit, right? And sometimes they'll plead guilty to a crime they didn't commit because of plea bargains and things like that.
I guess what makes us different here on this show is that we're open to facts. So if somebody says, hey, the guy's exonerated, the DNA doesn't match, the DNA matches someone else, it turns out somebody else did the crime, whether it's a death penalty case or any other case, right? And by the way, it's not just death penalty cases. If somebody's sitting in prison for decades for rape or burglary, whatever it might have been that they didn't commit, that's also an atrocity. At least that one we can reverse. We can let them out. We focus on the death penalty case because we can't reverse that. They're dead, right? And so now, in all those cases, if somebody says, look, the guy was exonerated, it makes me think, oh, okay, previously I would have thought, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, 8 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, do you believe that a lot of these confessions are coerced? I would have said, I think that's probably hyped up or over-exaggerated. Well, it turns out it's not hyped up because when you do the DNA testing, so that makes me reconsider whether they were coerced. Not just stick to whatever my goddamn position was and adjust accordingly.
So I think, sorry, Ben, I just want to give this stat real quickly because it agrees exactly with what you just said. So last year, we saw the highest number of exonerations of defendants on death row since 2009. There were six. Okay, so there were six. 3 were in Ohio, 2 in North Carolina, and 1 in Louisiana. All of the defendants had already been imprisoned for more than 30 years. Okay, these are death row inmates. And they're going to be murdered. They're going to be murdered by the country.
They're innocent. And so as part of the state, and we're all part of the state in a democracy, you would have helped to kill those people, right? And who were perfectly innocent, who'd already suffered for 30 years in prison for a crime they didn't commit. Their lives are ruined.
In Ohio, they were convicted in 1975.
Right. Their lives have been stripped away from them. Everybody they know assumed that they were murderers. Just the list of horrible things we've done to them. You've got to adjust your way of thinking if it turns out it isn't true.
Number of people released since 1973 from death row. 150. Like 150. And how many cases DNA played a role? 20. So it's mostly other things that frees these guys. DNA is incredibly useful, but it's not the end-all, be-all. Usually, average number of years for all those people between being sentenced to death and exoneration, they don't have to wait that long. The average is just 11 and a half years of being on death row before you finally get. And we've done story after story. The coercion of confession is a huge part of it, right? And the coercion of the confession usually comes after something else. Cops just don't arrest a guy and. Well, they might. But they probably don't just arrest a guy and coerce a confession right away. They have some other piece of evidence that they're convinced of. And it's an eyewitness, so then they coerce the confession after the eyewitness. I just remember the story because Dahlia Lithwick, I think it was Dahlia Lithwick, wrote about it some years ago, but an amazing story, and it just bears repeating on the Young Turks every so often. This woman was raped, and she identified her attacker described him and identified an attacker in the lineup, and they arrested the guy and they convicted him and sent him to prison for an extremely long and appropriate sentence for committing a rape. And then later, a couple of years later, DNA evidence came out, and it turned out he didn't do it. And it was another guy who had raped like 4 other women, so there was really no question that this time was the right guy, and they let that guy go. That woman who had identified the first guy, and no one's pointing the finger at her, huge trauma, and that's the guy and who knows whether police had influenced her in some way, but nonetheless, even forget that, leave that out. She still had dreams about the guy she wrongly accused. So in her dreams, and she was still massively plagued by this sexual assault, and she still dreamt of the guy who didn't do it, indicating that, man, our memories mess with us, and they are not reliable. But nothing, even almost more so than DNA. DNA now pretty powerful, but nothing is more powerful than sitting in an open court and having a witness say, no, he's sitting right there, Cenk Uygur. I saw him do the crime. That is incredibly powerful and frequently not reliable.
So, one last thing. A lot of people look at all this new evidence that comes in and they go, no, I'm not going to change my beliefs. So it must be that the DNA evidence is wrong, or the new evidence is wrong, or the guy that they caught is not really the right guy. We must have had the right guy, because they're not going to change their opinion, whether it's a death penalty or anything else. So, excuse me. So they're like, okay, I'm just going to warp the facts to suit my belief, rather than change my belief to suit the facts.
That's right. It's sick. All right. A gay lawmaker in Alabama is threatening to out some of her colleagues if they run on a platform of family values and use that platform to argue against same-sex marriage. This is Representative Patricia Todd, and she said the following: I will not stand by and allow legislators to talk about family values when they have affairs, and I know of many who are and have. I will call our elected officials who want to hide in the closet out. So she's basically saying, like, look, one of your major arguments, and she's referring to conservatives in Alabama, one of your major arguments against same-sex marriage is that it goes against family values, right? It goes against traditional marriage, and you're against it for that reason. Well, if you're having an affair, that's against family values too, so you should probably be out and open about that. You should be as transparent about that as possible.
So, look, we don't care about people's private lives. We don't think that it affects politics. And so, overall, I don't want you to do people's privacy. Republican, Democrat, and we've been consistent on the show. And sometimes we'll make fun of a Republican, then we'll say, let him go, right? Okay, because what you think about tax cuts or foreign policy is not really related to whether you're having an affair or not, right? But this is an exception because this is about that issue, right? So, and they're the ones who started it because they tell her your private life is sinful. And we're not going to give you the same rights as we enjoy because we're going to judge you. We're going to say that you're against family values. Even though she's never done anything wrong, and she says, look, I never cheated on anybody in my life, right? So I actually have these values. So now if you're going to do that to me, what's she supposed to do, sit there and take it? I mean, of course I would strike back, like, oh, you want to talk about family values? All right, Bob, let's have at it. Let's roll up our sleeves and talk about family values.
She already caused some damage, though, right? Like, for instance, if I were the wife of a lawmaker in Alabama, I'd probably meet up with Representative Todd and I'd be like, all right, here's the deal. Here's $10,000 for your next campaign. Is my husband cheating on me?
Man, damn, don't cheat on Anna. she's coming with a check. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's hypocrisy, right? And it's clear hypocrisy, and it goes against what they ran on, what they used to run on for their election. So if you're saying that you're like this self-righteous, holier-than-thou individual who really, really values the traditional family structure, then you shouldn't be cheating on your wife or husband.
I don't agree with it. I have to respect it. I get that it's the issue, that it's separate from if you're a budget hawk, right? Mm-hmm. So I get it, and I get her, and I like her. I would like her, I'm sure I would be friends with her, but I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Like the sanctity of privacy is critical. We talk about this all the time on the show regarding government spying. And believe me, the moment that I find out that I know it's coming, that we all sort of speculate on and think it's happened a couple times. The government is looking at much more than a terrorist cell in Trenton. I'm going to be outraged. But I just couldn't participate in this. It's not cool.
I totally see what you're saying, but I think it's a little unfair to equate that with government spying.
No, I'm not equating it. I'm just saying, I totally get where you guys are coming from.
Yeah.
You might be right. I couldn't do it, and I would respect the people who can't do it. I like that she's talking about it, and it's almost like a bluff, right? But if the time comes, I still hope she goes, no, I'm not going to frickin' out Frank, but I want to, and do I want to?
But Frank is openly cheating on his wife. That's the difference, right? So, the privacy thing I get, but if Frank is having an affair and this representative knows about it, I mean, how hard is he trying to keep it a secret?
It's just ugly. It is doing something ugly to rectify something ugly. Sometimes that's called for, but this is so specific and so personal that I'm not for it.
So, look, Ben is in some sense outliving us, right?
Right.
You're such a lib that you're even though it's probably intellectually consistent, I just can't pull the trigger and ruin that guy's life or whatever it might be, right? I can.
I know you can. I got it.
And so here's the thing, Ben. It's because I can sit in her shoes. How dare you judge me? How dare you? I mean, if you come at me and you tell me, I don't happen to be gay, so you'd have to pick something else that I do wrong, which there are plenty of. It's a target-rich environment.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So, and then you're going to come and out me on that, and you're going to say, I'm not going to give you the same rights and privileges, and I'm not going to treat you like a regular citizen because you do X. I got to roll up my sleeves.
I would roll up my sleeves too, but I would fight the way we fight. That's all. I mean, and she sounds like she'd fight the way we fight,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'd talk about it all the time. I'd talk about the indignity of the fact that so many of these Republicans are running around, and I'd say, and I know 6 of them who are having affairs right now. Because in a way, that gets all 60 of them in trouble. Right?
That's what I'm saying.
And then so you get the 54 who aren't saying to the 6 who aren't, hey, motherfucker.
Be cool.
Hey, cool. So I want her to talk about it. I don't want to be accused of standing by while people on the right under the auspices of family values come out and mock gays and ostracize single mothers and make people who they feel less than them outsiders. I don't want to stand by while that happens, but the tactic I don't want to take is airing their dirty laundry. It also sets off an ugly chain of events that could end in real tragedy that I just don't think you want to publicly get involved in.
One other thing that I do want to say is, let's say she does go the classy route and she doesn't actually out someone.
Right.
Yeah. She is on the winning side. So a federal judge already ruled that the gay marriage ban in Alabama is unconstitutional. However, there is a 2-week stay, which means that gay couples can't get married in Alabama yet. They have to wait to see if an appeals court is going to take on the case and if they're going to rule on it. But it seems as though Alabama is going to be the 37th state that legalizes same-sex marriage. So she's on the winning side.
I know, but I think that what she's trying to do is stay on the winning side. She knows the court's ruled that way. But this is when the legislature can come in and go, oh, yeah? Well, we don't care what the court says. And they'd be in the wrong, but they've done it many times in the past. And then they would pass laws anyway that at least blocks it for X period of time until the Supreme Court weighs in, et cetera, right? So now, if it turns out they don't do that in Alabama, then there's a good chance that even if she was bluffing, that bluff might have worked.
Right.
Like if they just take the court's ruling and go, oh, golly gee, I guess the court ruled, nothing we can do about that, then she might have been onto something.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's not even, by the way, she doesn't even have the facts. She's like, I'll just tell you what I heard.
No, that's exactly right.
She's I don't know. Yeah.
Which makes your argument a little
stronger.
Yeah, a little stronger. Anyway, let's take a quick break. When we come back, one Mississippi teacher is an American hero. I'll tell you why.
Kurt, I'll read a couple of nice tweets here. Yeah, sure. Why not? It's not about it. It's about us. Okay, Leo Silver says, Jen Hanna on Ben, the true power panel with TYT. Hashtag too strong. Thank you, Leo. Mrs. Dana says, it's the ABC hour. I hadn't thought about it that way. That makes sense. Maybe we should sit in that order.
Oh, yeah, ABC, right?
Yeah. Okay. No, I like it. So you guys can go ahead and fuck off. Ryan Zephyr says, for most people, you must be 100% Democrat or 100% Republican. That's why I like hashtag TYT Live. They consider facts and think for themselves. By the way, if you're reading me, watching me read these tweets over and over, I should say it more so you know how to communicate with us during the live show. Hashtag TYT Live on Twitter, and then I get your tweets right here, and I read some of them. And
can I do one real quick? Because I think it's relevant. A lot of people saying they agree with me. I appreciate that because I think it's relevant that somehow it crosses a line to out people that people aren't comfortable crossing. But one guy says, Hyperion Cipher, I agree with Ben Mank. Come on, what's the difference between doing this and outing gays years ago? And just for the record, always, for me at least, I never would have done that in a million years. I don't care how conservative you were. I don't care if you were. I think Larry Craig got screwed. It's a funny story.
Boy, did he.
But I got it. I ultimately I just sort of ache for him separate, individually, not obviously for the politician.
But why do you get to basically take away the rights of an entire group of people when you're out, while you're arguing that you're a more moral individual? Do you see what I'm saying?
Oh, no,
there's a difference there.
The reason you get to do that is that we all get to have the hideous things that exist in the darkness on the edge of town. Those are things that we all own and that we all carry shame for. And it's separate from the hideousness of what we do. Larry Craig and those guys should have, much more so than they did, gotten pounded on a regular basis for the stances they took, for those positions, because they're hideous.
Yeah.
And they're all by themselves enough to discredit him and drum him out of office. The hypocrisy we don't need. We're all a little hypocritical. And that never made me, I felt bad for Larry Craig. Just in that moment. I know JR fucking with the. I hear you. I don't think I'm. I think I'm in a minority there.
Okay.
Thank you for resisting.
I saw a movie. I'm sorry if I forget the name of the movie and the director. No, it was definitely not Annie. That switched my mind on this. A lot of switching of my mind going on.
Well, that's partly what makes you you.
And I used to be at Ben's camp, don't out people. It's let everybody have their edge of town, right? And we all have our different ones, and it is what it is, right? But it was a great movie documentary about how when Republicans are outed, or anybody's outed, they wind up voting pro-gay rights 1,000 times more. They immediately switch positions, etc., and it winds up having an effect on policy. And the other thing that's really important is the fact, again, I saw at some point, and I don't remember the specifics of, but that the number of gay people you know affects, or whether you know a gay person or not, affects what you think about gay rights enormously, right? So the outing process does have tremendous policy value.
I got it.
Right.
I don't doubt that. It's not the right kind of world. It's too impolite a world. It's too hideous and too ugly a world, and that has its own repercussions. The good news is that's over. Largely, we're there. Mm-hmm. Alabama is going to have gay marriage. Mm-hmm. We've won.
Okay, I resisted again. Ever and Jackson says, finally, having affairs doesn't ruin Republicans' lives. Republicans get to say sorry, pray their guilt away, and ta-da, clean slate. It's a point that Steve was making during the break. Steve-O was, hey, they just find Jesus. And they're like, oh, yeah, I know. Who's that son of a bitch? Desjardins from Tennessee. I know I had a couple of mistresses. Yeah, I got a couple of mistresses.
Is that the guy who did made her get abortion?
Yeah, I know I got him pregnant. Yeah, I know they were my patients. He was a doctor.
Right.
Yeah, and I know I made them get an abortion. And I know at the same time I got my wife pregnant and I made her get an abortion.
Oh, God.
But it's okay. On the way, right after the abortion clinic, I found Jesus on the way.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, what are you doing on Walnut Street?
Yeah, totally.
Hey, Jesus, how you doing? It's a funny coincidence I ran into you right after I fucked half the town, got them pregnant, and I made them abort the pregnancies. Yeah. But it's okay. I found it. And then unbelievably, Republican voters go, praise you.
Yeah.
I mean, their answer to that insanity is. All right. Members of the day are. Wow, a lot of tweets today. Griselda Salazar, awesome name, member number 2189, and Jeffrey Duncan, member number 7744. Jeffrey Duncan, that helped on Mad as Hell? Maybe? Okay. So, by the way, Mad as Hell again released very soon, February 6th. Okay, madashellfilm.com has all the details, so now finally everybody can see it.
Is that the movie where you found out that outing the gay guy changes things?
No. The things get outed in that movie, but not that. All right, in the post game, what are we going to talk about? I had an interesting moment in Miami with a conspiracy theorist that recognized me, and then it said something slightly haunting.
Okay. Great.
Interesting. Okay, haunting. Okay, all right, forward.
All right. Mississippi has a strong policy against comprehensive sex education for grade school students. In fact, the only thing that they teach is abstinence-only sex education, despite the fact that 76% of teenagers that graduate high school confess that they have sex by the time they graduate high school. Nonetheless, Mississippi is also the state that leads the country in unwanted teen pregnancies.
How dumb are these people?
They're
running
insanely
the system
dumb.
in Mississippi?
Insanely dumb. In fact, let me give you another crazy statistic. It turns out that when it comes to unwanted pregnancies, or the number of pregnancies, 76% of Mississippi teenagers report having sex before the end of high school, and a third of babies in the state are born to teenage mothers. A third, okay? That is an astronomical amount of teen pregnancies.
And so in Mississippi, you're banned from showing how to use a condom.
Yes. So if you are an educator in Mississippi, the law indicates that you are not allowed to teach anything about, condoms, contraceptives. You're just supposed to tell kids, don't have sex or else you're going to die. Okay?
D-I-E, die.
Now, there's one educator there, Sanford Johnson, who realizes that this is a really... Really, Jake? Really?
Sorry.
Anyway, he realized that this was a really big problem, so he found a really interesting loophole, and his video has gone viral on YouTube. Take a look.
If you're going to be engaged in a sock activity, whether you're wearing an athletic shoe or whether you're using a dress shoe, it doesn't matter to me as long as your foot is protected. I want to make sure that you have on the sock. So if I'm putting on the sock, what I do is I start with the sock and I want to pinch out the air out of the tip of the sock because I want to make sure that there's room for my toes when I'm engaging in shoe activity. And then I take the sock and I put it on top of my foot, and all I do is just roll it down. Just roll it down. Now some people stop right here and just only put that sock on halfway. That's not how you do it. You want to take your sock and you want to roll it all the way down your foot. You want to roll it all the way down your foot, and then you can put it inside your shoe. And then you're ready to engage in the shoe activity. Now when I'm done with the shoe activity, remember, whether it's athletic shoe, dress shoe, I don't care. That is not mattering. But when I'm done, what I do is I take the top of the sock and I make sure that I hold it very tight, and then I pull it outside of the shoe, and then I can just pull the sock off. I pull the sock off, I tie it up, because I don't want sweat to fall out or anything like that, and then I toss it away, put it in the hamper. So if you're going to engage in a shoe-related activity, make sure that your foot is protected. Make sure that you use a sock each and every time.
I love that.
Oh, who doesn't love this guy? This is the greatest guy. This is the best teacher in America.
Best teacher in America.
Congratulations, teacher of the year.
And so, the conservatives are gonna, I just see people like S.E. Cupp rolling their eyes, and I don't know what her stance is on giving condoms to kids, but let's assume it's the wrong one.
I think it's a fair assumption. S.E. Cupp. I'm an atheist. God bless God. What?
But they're all going to suggest, and I only use her just because she's the first person I thought of. They're all going to suggest this is silly. Kids know how to use condoms. It's not the place of school, but they really don't.
They don't.
And you've got to remember, because we're talking about reaching 14, 13, 14, 15-year-olds, and the shame that you felt. And I'm just, somehow, as Anna was reading the story, in the way I didn't when we brought it up in the morning meeting, I remember back to thinking, who's going to tell me how to use a condom?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how am I going to know which side you're supposed to put on? You know?
Are you kidding me? If the idea that my immigrant parents would have that conversation with me, if somebody mentioned condom, they would have been like, "We have to leave the house right away." They would have ran out of the house with their hair on fire. They're not going to get me telling me about shoe-related activities.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other great thing about that lesson is how much it sticks.
It really
You're not going to forget that. Totally, yeah. You know, it's a brilliant teaching mechanism.
Very brilliant. So education is definitely half of the equation, but also having access to contraceptives is the other half of the equation, right? So in California, where you do get comprehensive sex education, you also have access to contraceptives all the time. Like, yes, there's Planned Parenthood, which conservatives wanted to fund, but there's also, you know, counselors' offices you can go to, and there's like a big jar full of condoms, and you can do that. I mean, in conservative states, they're defunding places like Planned Parenthood, so you don't see as many clinics around. And also, you're not going to go into an educator's office or something and see a massive jar full of condoms. And these kids are shamed into thinking like, oh my God, sex is wrong, and they keep it under wraps. Well, that was ironic. No pun intended. So they'll feel embarrassed going out and looking for protection. So education is really important, but you also have to make, you know, condoms accessible.
Yeah. So I say, I'll go with the end of the school year, June 4th. Mm-hmm. What's your prediction?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. You don't think he'll make it that long?
Yeah. He's going to get fired.
We're predicting when Sanford Johnson loses his job.
Yeah.
I'm thinking quietly at the end of the year, but you're just saying they just go ahead and fire him.
No, yeah, they're going to take it. They have to take immediate action. They can't have people who do shoe activities.
Yeah.
Shoe activities.
They can't have teachers teaching kids. They can't have that in Mississippi. It goes against the state constitution.
So, in the middle of the story, something weird happened to me. I did one of these like things I do. I'm like, yes, right? I was like, yes, I'm on the side of facts.
Right.
Like, there's a whole sea of people on the opposite side.
That's right.
Where they say we don't care about facts. They say, look, I don't teach abstinence only, but my God, 76% of teenagers in your state have sex before they leave high school. How can you think that abstinence works after you teach them abstinence? After you taught them abstinence, right? And then you still say, no, yep. That sounds about right. Yeah, we got that right. Yeah, 3/4 had the sex anyway. Yeah, abstinence works. Hey, how glad am I that I'm on the opposite side as you? That I'm on the side of facts and you're on the side of insanity. I feel terrible for the people that you affect. But thank God this side exists.
Yeah, I got another. Just take a deep breath and let your kids have some condoms and teach them how to use them. It's not so bad. It's fine. Everything else can stay the same.
So the state with the lowest rates of teen pregnancies is actually New Hampshire. And in New Hampshire, they teach comprehensive sex ed.
Okay. In New Hampshire, the teachers put the condom on for you.
They don't do that.
Nobody wants to fuck their shit.
You're the worst. Or it might be
it's just a fact. It's true.
Or it might be that New Hampshire's so cold nobody's bothering to go outside to get laid. So, but
anyway,
these are just different theories.
Yeah.
Okay. But I like the Mississippi legislator. Like, no, 100 girls are around pregnant right here.
It doesn't matter what you say. Your spit at the end sort of makes sense. The Kansas guy did too. Shoot at the tornado.
I got that tornado.
All right, one more story for you guys. Actor Benedict Cumberbatch was on the Tavis Smiley show, and he was talking about the lack of diversity in the UK when it comes to the world of acting. And here's what he had to say. I think as far as colored actors go, it gets really different in the UK. And a lot of my friends have had more opportunities here in the US than in the UK, and that's something that needs to change. Something's gone wrong. We're not representative enough in our culture of different races, and that really does need to step up a pace. Okay.
He said colored people. What has he done?
So people were upset because he used colored instead of, whatever, something else. People of, you can say people.
I'm pretty sure that's not it now. Pretty sure.
So I'm just as ignorant, I guess, as Cumberbatch, because I didn't realize that you can't say that.
Yeah.
I've actually said it before.
Yeah. So now he's in a particularly tight spot because he's from the UK. He can't say African American.
That's right. He literally doesn't mean it.
It's possible that he has run out of words he can use.
And it's possible that he's not specifically referring to
that's
black
what we thought.
people.
We thought maybe like he really meant, it's funny because if he'd said people of color, he's fine.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
If he said people of color, it's fine. But he said colored. And that is a little bit crazy, but that's a distinction.
No, and look, so I'm actually a little split on it. So, look, first of all, everyone needs to calm down. It's okay to say black people. Like, I remember somebody, we just hired somebody here who happens to be black, and somebody's trying to describe her, and they're like, well, and I know who it is, like, she wears glasses, she's about 5. I'm like, yeah, the black girl that just walked by. They're like, yeah, that's it.
The best example I have for this, I've said it before, but it's in boxing matches. The announcers in boxing matches are terrified. It's a white guy fighting a black guy, right? And it's boxing, and people who don't know boxing, you come in and you might watch the fight, and you're like, oh, who's fighting? And they're like, oh, Smith and Jones. You're like, oh, well, they're tangled up together. Who's who? You're like, well, Jones is wearing the dark blue trunks.
Yep.
And Smith is wearing the light blue trunks. Like, dude, Jones is black. Smith is white. Help a brother out. Like, it's okay. It's okay. I just want to know. Yeah.
But at the same time, I get why people say, hey, you know what? We don't use colored people anymore. And it's a little antiquated. And so let's just get beyond it. It's just a friendly reminder. It's not to say that this guy's a bad guy. Like, oh, how dare you, piece of shit, right? No, it's just saying, look, it's obvious from your statement that you're trying to say the right thing and you're on the right side and we appreciate it. But we're using different language. Now you might say like, oh, you're nitpicking, right? But there's a lot of words we don't use anymore. We don't use Oriental anymore. We don't use Chinaman. We don't use Muslimin or Mohammedan, right? There's a ton of words we don't use. So it's okay for somebody to every once in a while come out and say, I love you, brother, but now we say this instead of that.
I totally get what you're saying. At the same time, the conversation is now about, oh, he used colored instead of the content of what he said. And the content of what he said was great.
Yeah, right.
It shows what a great person he is.
He's a thoughtful, forward-thinking person.
He's thoughtful. He's noticed a problem in the industry. He wants to address it. And instead of saying like, oh, this is great, and now we're like, okay, well, colored, is it antiquated? Can we still say this? Blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I want to give him a 100% pass just because I know that there was no ill will in anything he said.
Oh, and he was mortified. I mean, his statement after was,
oh my God, I am totally sorry for that.
Totally sorry.
This led to like the most sincere apology of all time. All right, so let me read it to you. Graphic 13. I'm devastated to have...
Don't be devastated. It's going to be all right, baby. Just bring it down.
I'm devastated to have caused offense by using this outmoded terminology. I offer my sincere apologies. I make no excuse for my being an idiot and know the damage is done. What damage is done, though? Damage is done? I can only hope this incident will highlight the need for correct usage of terminology that is accurate and inoffensive. And then later on, he continues calling himself an idiot. Just calm down. Everything's going to be okay.
He's now changed his name. His new nickname, his middle name is now Mortified.
Yeah,
Benedict Mortified Cumberbatch.
I'm with Anna. I give him 100% that. I don't even know that in England it has the same history. Like, we can't ignore the fact that colored sort of replaced Negro, and that there wasn't a time that was a word choice of racists who were trying not to use the N-word and were trying not to seem racist, because a long time after, when black became the accepted term, people went down south and still used colored, and no question they would use it pejoratively. That said, it's also used, like my favorite writer of all time, Elmore Leonard. In almost every book, he has a character say colored. And it conveys a very specific thing. If it's not an old school Southern, if it's like a guy from Detroit, you're like, oh, that guy's somehow badass, right? And not racist. But I'm pretty sure Benedict Cumberbatch wasn't using that context. But he clearly didn't know.
Yeah, I don't want anybody to get me wrong. I give him 100% pass too. Obviously, he didn't mean anything bad by it. Look, my dad, when we used to play in the old days,
all the time.
What was the game we played?
The Parent Trap.
Parent Trap, where we quiz them on pop culture, and we'd be like, okay, the guy in Training Day.
We were like, we'd say name the 3 Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, and he would be like, oh, the one, you did the one with the colored guy. Which one was that?
That's because he grew up in a different era where that was the perfectly acceptable thing to say. And it's the NAACP, the National Association, and there's another A in there, of colored people. Okay, for the advancement of colored people, right? So we get it, but what I'm doing is I'm also giving a pass to the guy saying, hey, I'm not judging you, but we just don't use that word in that way anymore.
Yeah,
See what I'm saying?
Totally. I get it. It's okay. And in fact, the people who were quoted in the story as being angry were barely even angry, because they acknowledged the context of what he said.
Yeah, I don't even think they were angry.
They might have been angry at all. And so the funny thing is that these stories get out, and Anna did a great job, but not everybody will do that great job of presenting it, and it will say people are outraged at Benedict Cumberbatch, and I'm not sure anyone is outraged at Benedict Cumberbatch. He may have literally apologized to no one, but his original sentiment was good, and his apology sentiment was also good, if overdone. Like, he gets a 200% pass.
Yeah.
It's official. Benedict Cumberbatch, TYT has pardoned.
He's so not guilty. You can go ahead and say something racist now.
Yeah, it's such a full pardon that you could even drop the mortified from your name.
I told Anna this real quick, last story before we go. In the morning meeting, I told Anna this story, but in case you've forgotten, I have a friend who's incredibly PC about language. He doesn't like the word maid used ever. He thinks that, like, he literally thinks kissing a woman is somehow like some form of sexual aggression that disrespects her.
Wait till he gets a load of fucking.
No, but he's had women naked on his lap at night, and I'll be like, so, dude, what happened? I knew she was into you. He's like, I just sort of stroked her hair. I'm like, I think she wants you to fuck her. You know?
Okay, he's straight, right?
Totally. You know it.
Okay, all right.
And so we go to Vegas. He's never met Michael Schur.
I've never heard of a guy so PC, he's too PC to fuck.
That's true. He was, unquestionably. So we go to Vegas.
That breaks a lib record, man.
I go to meet Michael Schur in Vegas, and I've told him, I'm like, great guy. And then it just suddenly occurs to me, given how PC is, Michael and I make this little plan that I will introduce him at the blackjack table. They meet, and I'm like, Michael, just use the word colored at some point. And so Michael says, I'm like, oh, were you playing at the other table? Michael goes, yeah, but this colored guy at the end was screwing it all up, hitting on 17, pissed me off, so I came over here. And as soon as he says that, correct. As soon as he says it, the guy's like, what? And I'm like, hey, relax, he's old. Michael's just old school. It's just the way he talks. He's just old school. But this guy is mortified.
You should have fucked with him more.
I couldn't do it. We couldn't do it. It was too terrifying. And I don't think Michael wanted to pretend to be a racist for long either. But it was good. It was a great, and of course, Michael's a pretty good actor. It was a great moment because he totally sold it.
Yeah, that guy is so PC, he won't even call it a blackjack table.
He won't.
He calls it an African American jack table. All right. By the way, final word. Benedict Cumberbatch. I partly don't want to see his movies because I feel like I'll be going there to eat my vegetables.
Right.
Like it's like a weird. I'm not even entirely kidding. It's this weird thing that it's like Cumberbatch. Oh, that's probably going to be good for me, that movie.
You'd totally dig the Imitation Game.
The Imitation Game?
Yeah, I mean, it's overrated.
Oh, the one he's in. Oh, right.
It's overrated, but it's good.
And he was in 12 Years a Slave, wasn't he?
Was he? Who did he play?
Was Bart, our expert. Yeah, I think he was.
Huh? I don't even remember.
So he was, right?
Yeah. I guess he was. Well, he was the colored guy.
The funny thing is, he wasn't.
No, he definitely wasn't. I guess he was one of the kindly.
I think he was
slightly kinder white guys at the beginning. Yeah, that's right.
All right, everybody. Much love. We'll do the usual inappropriate stories in the post game. All right. Bye.